Picture a New Hampshire back road in the month of February. Snow piled high on both shoulders. Bare trees standing like fence posts against a sky that's already going dark by 5. No streetlights. No cell signal. Just a narrow stretch of pavement your headlights can reach. And then, nothing. If you've ever driven through rural New England in winter, you know exactly what that feels like. The farther you go, the smaller your world gets. Somewhere along one of those roads, on February 9th, 2004, a 21-year-old college student vanished. No sightings, no phone calls, no body, no answer. More than 20 years later, people are still asking the same question. What happened to Maura Murray? Here's what makes this case different from most missing person stories. There's no struggle, no witness to an abduction, no grainy security footage of a stranger's car. What happened to Maura didn't start with violence. It started with a string of small, ordinary decisions. And it's only when you line them all up, one after another, that they stop looking ordinary at all. So let's go back. Not to the night she disappeared, a few days before it. Maura was a nursing student at UMass Amherst. Smart, athletic, the kind of driven that gets you into West Point, which is exactly where she started college before transferring out. On paper, her life looked like it was heading somewhere good. But underneath that, she was carrying more than people realized. For days before she disappeared, Maura was working her campus security job when a phone call came in, and whatever was said on the other end of that line wrecked her. A supervisor found her barely able to speak. When they asked what was wrong, she said 2 words. My sister. That's it. That's all anyone got. And for 20 years, people have turned those 2 words over and over, trying to figure out what they meant. Was something happening with her sister Kathleen, who, investigators later learned, was struggling with alcohol and a difficult relationship at the time? Was it something bigger? Or was it just a bad moment that only feels significant now? Because of what came after? Nobody knows. Nobody has ever known. Then, less than 24 hours before she vanished, it happened again, a second hit. Early morning, February 8th, Maura was driving one of her father's cars, coming back from a party, when she crashed it into a guardrail near his hotel in Hadley, Massachusetts. Nobody was seriously hurt. Her father, Fred, would later say the car didn't matter. He just wanted to know she was okay. But think about the week she was having. A sister in crisis. A car wreck. And it's not even Monday yet. Monday, February 9th, the day everything changes. Maura emails her professors. Tells them she'll be gone for about a week. Says there's been a death in the family. There wasn't. She emails work. Says she won't be in. Then she goes online and starts looking directions north toward New Hampshire and Vermont, lodging near the White Mountains. She drives to an ATM and pulls out almost every dollar she has. Just under 300. The security footage shows her doing it slowly, calmly, like someone who already knows what she's about to do. From there, she stops at a liquor store. Boxed wine, vodka, Bailey's, Kahlua. None of this is illegal. None of it is proof of anything, really. But sit with it for a second. The fake excuse, the cash, the alcohol, the vague direction north with no destination anyone can name. No hotel reservation. No friend expecting her. Nobody in her life knew exactly where she was going. She just packed her black Saturn and drove. As the afternoon turned to evening, the world around her started to thin out. Cities became forests. Traffic disappeared. The gaps between houses got wider and wider, the way they do once you're truly off the map. By early evening, she was on Route 112, just outside a small town called Woodsville. And at 7:27 p.m., it happened. A crash. Neighbors heard it before they saw it. That unmistakable sound of a car leaving the road. When they looked outside, there was a black Saturn resting near a sharp bend locals call Weather Barn Corner. It wasn't a bad crash. Front-end damage. Airbags deployed. Steam curling up off the hood into the cold night air. Within minutes, a school bus driver named Butch Atwood pulled over to check on her. Maura was shaken, but conscious. Butch offered to call the police. She said no. She told him she'd already called roadside assistance herself. Here's the problem with that. Cell service in that stretch of New Hampshire barely existed. Investigators would later say it was almost impossible she'd gotten a call through. So why did she say she had? Did she genuinely believe it? Was she trying to keep the police out of it? Maybe because of the crash the night before? Or was there another reason entirely, one she never got the chance to explain? We don't know. We may never know. Butch drove home and called it in himself. Dispatch logged the call just minutes after he left her. That's how little time passed. Minutes later, the first officer arrived at the scene. The Saturn was still there. Maura Murray was not. When Officer Cecil Smith pulled up behind that damaged Saturn, the scene looked routine at first glance. Rural New Hampshire cops see this every winter. Ice, curves, fading light, a car leaves the road. It happens. It's unfortunate, but it's not a mystery. What was a mystery was what he didn't find. The driver. The Saturn sat off the road, nose pointed west, front end crumpled, both airbags deployed. Glass and plastic scattered in the snow. Everything you'd expect from a crash. Except no one was inside. The car was empty. And that one fact turned a routine accident report into something else entirely. Here's what you need to understand about the timeline, because it's the thing that breaks this case wide open. Butch Atwood had just spoken with Maura minutes earlier. By some estimates, only 7 to 10 minutes passed between that conversation and the first officer arriving on scene. Sit with that. A young woman, alone, on a dark rural road in the middle of winter. Gone in less time than it takes to watch the opening of a TV episode. No one saw her walk away. No one saw another car stop. No one heard a scream, a struggle, anything. She was just gone. And here's what makes it stranger. Whoever left that car didn't take the things you'd expect someone to take if they were planning to disappear. Her clothes were still inside. Her textbooks. Her toiletries. Some of the alcohol she'd bought that afternoon. Maps. All of it just sitting there. This wasn't a car that had been cleaned out. This looked like someone had packed for a short trip and then simply stepped out of the frame. Investigators also found red stains in the car and in the snow outside it. For a moment, everyone feared the worst. It turned out to be spilled wine, not blood, which should have been a relief. Instead, it was just one more detail that raised questions instead of answering them. Now think about the weather. It was already well below freezing that night. If Maura had wandered into the woods unprepared, exposure alone could have killed her within hours. But here's the thing experienced search teams kept coming back to. Fresh snow doesn't hide people. It exposes them. Footprints stay. Broken branches stay. Compressed snow tells a story. So when search teams combed the area around the crash site, they expected to find a trail. They found nothing. No footprints leading into the trees. No clear path along the road. And that single missing detail has driven almost every theory about this case for 20 years. If she walked into the woods, where are the tracks? If she walked along the road, why did nobody see her? And if she got into a car, whose car was it? Investigators went door to door. Neighbor after neighbor. Some had heard the crash. Some remember the school bus. One person even confirmed seeing a young woman near the Saturn right after it happened, which lined up with what Butch had already told police. And then after that, nothing. Every single account just stops at the same few minutes. It's like she stepped outside of time itself. Did she leave the second Butch drove off? Did she wait until his taillights disappeared? Was she hiding somewhere close by, try to figure out what to do? Or did someone else show up in that window? Every one of those questions is still open. Every single one. As word reached Maura's family, the story shifted from she'll turn up to something much heavier. At first, everyone reached for the simple explanations. Maybe she got a ride into town. Maybe she found shelter. Maybe she just needed to be alone for a bit after wrecking a second car in 2 days. But as hours turned into days, those explanations got harder and harder to believe. Her father, Fred, threw himself into the search completely. Volunteers came. Local police came. Helicopters swept the forest with thermal cameras. Search dogs worked the tree line. Ground crews walked miles of woods, streams, ditches, and abandoned buildings. And the land itself fought them the whole way. Northern New Hampshire is gorgeous and brutal. Steep hills, frozen rivers, ravines that swallow sound. People who know these woods, can still get turned around in minutes. One of the earliest leads came from the cadaver and tracking dogs. They picked up Maura's scent and followed it only a short distance east along the road. And it just stopped, right around the middle of the roadway. So people took that as proof she got into a car. Others pushed back. Scent trails are fragile things, thrown off by weather, traffic time, road salt, or just too many people walking through the area before the dogs arrived. Once again, the evidence pointed in a direction and then quietly refused to confirm anything. Meanwhile, investigators kept circling back to Maura's choices in those final days. Why the fake story about a death in the family? Why empty her bank account? Why look up cabins in the White Mountains and tell no one where she was actually going? Some read this as evidence of a plan, a young woman quietly arranging to disappear. Others saw something much more human. Sometimes people just need to get away. School piles up. Family stress piles up. Relationships get complicated. Sometimes a 21-year-old just wants 3 days where nobody can reach her. Neither explanation proves anything on its own. But once someone vanishes, every ordinary decision starts to look like a clue. There was also the matter of the crash 2 nights earlier, the one in her father's car. Some wondered if that was the real reason she waved off Butch's offer to call the police. Maybe she was scared of another citation. Maybe it was the alcohol in the car. Maybe she just didn't want to explain, again, what had happened. Fair enough. That might explain why she didn't want police at the scene. It does not explain how she vanished completely within minutes of saying so. The investigation reached far past that stretch of Route 112. Bank statements, credit cards, phone records, emails, every possible sighting chased down. None of it led anywhere. That ATM withdrawal, the one from earlier that afternoon, remained her last confirmed transaction. The surveillance footage from the bank remained among the last verified images of her alive. And that's when investigators had to sit with something deeply uncomfortable. They knew in detail almost everything Maura Murray did up until 7:27 p.m. on February 9th, 2004. And after that moment, nothing. Not a slow fade. Not a gradual loss of contact. An instant stop. Most missing person cases leave behind a trail of small things. One more phone call, one more purchase, one more person who saw them at a gas station. Something. Maura Murray left behind a car full of her belongings, a set of tire tracks in the snow, and no trail at all. Every missing person investigator dreads this stage. The longer a case goes without new evidence, the harder it gets to tell a real clue from background noise. Tips start flooding in from everywhere. Some are sincere. Some are honest mistakes. A few are outright lies. And every single one has to be checked because any one of them could be the thing that cracks the case open. In Maura's case, hundreds of tips came in. Almost all of them went nowhere. A few looked promising, right up until they didn't. Let's start with the most obvious question. How far could she have gotten on foot? The crash happened around 7:27 p.m. Police arrived just minutes later. If Maura started walking the second Butch drove off, how much ground could she actually cover? Search specialists later said a healthy young adult could move a surprising distance in 10 or 15 minutes, especially walking the road instead of trudging through deep snow. But here's the catch. Route 112 wasn't some abandoned back road. Cars passed through periodically. If Maura had been walking along that shoulder, somebody probably would have seen her. Nobody ever did. No verified witness ever placed her walking away from that crash site. And that silence tells you almost as much as physical evidence would. So investigators turned to the obvious alternative. Maybe she got in a car. Think about it from her side for a second. You're 21. You just wrecked a car. Your second wreck in 2 days. It's freezing. You're already dreading another conversation with police. And then someone pulls over and offers you a ride. Would you take it? Honestly, a lot of people would, especially back in 2004. No smartphones, no rideshare apps, no GPS tracking your every move. Hitching a short ride to the next town wasn't the red flag it might feel like today. But here's where it gets uncomfortable. Was that driver just a good Samaritan who dropped her off safely and never thought about it again? Or did Maura get into a car with someone who had other intentions? Nobody ever came forward. No witness ever described her getting into another vehicle. No camera caught it. The road just swallowed the answer whole. Investigators also looked hard at what was going on inside Maura's head that week. People who knew her described someone warm, close to her family, disciplined enough to handle serious academic pressure without cracking. But underneath that, she was carrying weight nobody could fully see. That phone call about her sister. The crash in her father's car. The ordinary stress of being a college student trying to hold everything together. None of that proves she planned to vanish. But it proves her life was more complicated than it looked from the outside. And that matters because most people want this story to be simple. Either she planned this, or something happened to her. Real life is almost never that clean. People leave for 100 tangled reasons. Exhaustion, fear, heartbreak, hope, sometimes all at once. Sometimes someone just needs a few hours to breathe. Sometimes those few hours turn into something they never intended and never come back from. That gray area is exactly where this case lives. As the search went on, it got more advanced, not less. Ground-penetrating radar, cadaver dogs, divers in nearby rivers and lakes. Search teams came back to the same forest season after season, because snow hides things in winter that grass and mud reveal in summer. What's remarkable isn't just how big these searches were. It's how long they've kept going. Different teams, different decades, different technology, and still nothing. Some people take that as proof she left the area entirely, probably in a car. Others push back because the wilderness doesn't have to give up its secrets just because you search it thoroughly. Animals move remains. Floods reshape land. Snow comes and goes and comes again. Things that seem impossible to miss can quietly disappear under years of ordinary weather. Then there's the question of why there, of all places. Investigators pulled her browser history. She'd been looking at lodging in New Hampshire and Vermont, specifically the White Mountains, a place her family had actually vacationed before. It wasn't random. It was somewhere she associated with quiet, with space, with getting away. But despite everything investigators did, they never found a reservation in her name. No motel clerk remembered checking her in. No waitress remembered serving her. No gas station camera caught her past the crash site. It's like the trip ended before it really started. Here's the sentence that retired investigators keep coming back to, even now, 20 years later. Everything before the crash makes sense. Everything after it doesn't. Look at how tight the timeline actually is. 3:15 in the afternoon. She's at the ATM. Not long after, the liquor store. Then she's driving north. By 7:27 p.m., she's crashed. She talks to Butch for a few minutes. Police show up. She's gone. That entire known story fits inside a single afternoon. The unknown part of the story has now lasted over 20 years. Over those 2 decades, theory after theory has taken hold. Maybe she started a new life somewhere, on purpose. Maybe she wandered into the woods and never found her way out. Maybe she got into the wrong car. Maybe someone who already knew that stretch of road found her first. And every single theory runs into the same wall. If she disappeared on purpose, why leave behind her ID, her cash, every way of reaching the outside world? If she got lost in the wilderness, why has every search for 20 years come up completely empty? If someone else was involved, how did they find her, take her, and vanish without leaving a single trace, all inside a window of just a few minutes? The harder you look at this case, the less certain it becomes. And maybe that's exactly why Maura Murray's disappearance has held on in the public imagination the way it has. Most infamous cases become infamous because there's too much evidence pointing in too many directions. This one is the opposite. There's almost nothing. No sighting. No transaction. No phone call. No discovery that tips the scale one way or the other. Just questions. Questions that have been sitting in those New Hampshire woods for more than 20 years now, waiting for the one piece that never seems to come. Something shifted in the second year of this case. The search for Maura Murray stopped being just a police matter. It became something ordinary people simply refused to let go of. Volunteers kept coming back to the White Mountains year after year. Independent researchers spent thousands of hours untangling the timeline. Journalists went back and interviewed the same witnesses again and again, hoping someone's memory would loosen up just enough to surface one detail that hadn't seemed important back in 2004. Online communities formed, people poring over maps, weather logs, dispatch records, comparing notes like it was their own family member missing. That kind of sustained attention is rare. Most cases fade unless there's a breakthrough. This one did the opposite. The longer it went unsolved, the more people leaned in. And maybe that's because the story never actually ends. There's no final location. No last confirmed conversation. No crime scene, really, just a car abandoned on the side of a quiet road. Even people who disagree on everything else about this case agree on one thing. Whatever happened to Maura, it happened after she stepped out of that Saturn. The crash isn't the mystery. It's just the last thing anyone's sure of. Let's talk about the witnesses, because this is where things get genuinely strange. Memory isn't as reliable as we'd like to believe. Psychologists have shown this again and again. People misremember details constantly, especially when they didn't realize in a moment that what they were seeing mattered. A passing car, a shape near the road, the order emergency vehicles arrived in. None of it feels worth remembering until you find out someone vanished, and suddenly every fragment feels like it might be the key. Some witnesses remembered the Saturn's interior light being on. Some thought they saw movement near the car. One person swore they saw someone smoking a cigarette by the vehicle. Here's the problem. Maura's family has always maintained she didn't smoke. So what did that witness actually see? Investigators later floated a theory. Maybe it was the glow of a cell phone screen, mistaken in the dark for a cigarette. Maybe not. It's a small detail, but it tells you something bigger about this entire case. Nothing here is as certain as it first appears. Then there's the cold. February nights in that part of New Hampshire drop hard below freezing, especially once you're up in elevation, surrounded by trees. Without proper gear, exposure becomes dangerous fast. Some investigators believe fear is what drove her into the woods. Not fear of the dark, fear of another run-in with police after the crash 2 nights before. Maybe she just wanted to wait them out. People do that. Panic over something small and end up walking straight into something much bigger. It's a reasonable theory, but it runs into the same wall every theory runs into. Fresh snow holds a footprint. If she'd walked off that road right after the crash, there should have been a trail, unless something very specific erased it. And searchers, again and again, have come back with the same answer. There wasn't one. So what about the darker possibility that someone else was there? Rural highways feel safe. Light traffic, spread out homes, that sense that nothing bad happens on a quiet road like this. And most of the time, that's true. Most people driving that stretch that night were just going home. But investigators can't rule out the alternative. Could someone have passed by in that narrow window, stopped, and left with her before police arrived? It's possible. It would also have taken almost impossible timing. A driver would have had to pass at exactly the right moment, stop without anyone noticing, get her into the car, willingly or not, and disappear completely before an officer showed up minutes later. Possible. Not easy, but possible. Here's what really gets me about this case, if I'm honest with you. Read the timeline without knowing how it ends. A young woman decides to take a short trip. She crashes on an empty road. She turns down help. Police show up a few minutes later. That's it. That's a Tuesday. That's an insurance claim and a tow truck. Instead, one small strange thing stacks on top of another. until you're left with something that shouldn't be possible. A person who was there, and then, within minutes, simply wasn't. Over the years, the science caught up. DNA testing got better. Mapping got sharper. Ground-penetrating radar improved. Cell technology moved forward in ways nobody could have predicted in 2004. Investigators went back through everything, hoping modern tools could pull something out of the old evidence. But here's the cruel part of this particular case. Technology needs something to work with. A body, a weapon, clothing, biological material, anything. In Maura's case, there was nothing to test. They weren't just missing answers. They were missing the evidence that could ever produce one. Over 20 years, certain places have pulled the spotlight again and again. Certain houses, abandoned buildings, ponds, clearings in the woods, construction sites that popped up out of nowhere as leads. Every one of them brought a wave of hope. Every one of them made the news. And every single one ended the same way. Nothing. But here's what's easy to forget after 20 years of podcasts and documentaries and forum threads picking this case apart theory by theory. For one family, this was never a puzzle to solve. It was a daughter, a sister, missing. Fred Murray spent decades keeping this case alive, doing interviews, organizing searches, pushing investigators to follow every lead, no matter how small. And through all of it, the family kept saying the same thing. The theories don't matter. Finding her does. Maybe that's really why this story has stuck with people the way it has. Most of us have thought about just getting in the car and driving somewhere. No explanation, just to breathe for a few days. Most of us have driven a dark, unfamiliar road, fully expecting to arrive fine. None of that is unusual. What's unusual is what happened after. Or maybe more accurately, what never happened after. No sighting, no call, no message, no discovery in 20 years that has ever closed the gap that opened up on Route 112 that February night. 2 decades, entire generations of forensic advancement, thousands of search hours, hundreds of square miles covered, some of them more than once. And the center of this case hasn't moved an inch. Somewhere between a damaged Saturn on a dark road and the headlights of the first police car, something happened that nobody has ever been able to fully piece back together. Maybe it was an accident that spiraled. Maybe it was a choice she made and never got to explain. Maybe someone else entered the picture. Whatever it was, one thing is certain. Somebody, somewhere, knows more than investigators do. Maybe it's a witness who never realized what they actually saw that night. Maybe it's someone who crossed paths with Maura and never came forward. Maybe in some way it's locked inside those last few confirmed minutes only Maura herself ever lived through. The full story exists. It has to. The tragedy is that it may have disappeared just as completely as she did. Until something new surfaces, a witness, a discovery, a piece of evidence nobody's found yet. Maura Murray's disappearance stays exactly what it's been for over 20 years. A reminder that the most haunting mysteries aren't always built on some elaborate scheme. Sometimes they're just a string of small, ordinary moments, one after another, until the very last one simply doesn't happen at all. And out there on Route 112, where the trees still stand close to the road and the winter dark still comes early, that silence from February 9th, 2004 is still sitting there. Still waiting on the one answer nobody's ever been able to give. Thank you for watching. If you enjoy well-researched true crime documentaries that separate fact from fiction, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications for more stories every week.